Hello and welcome to the Heaven Bound Sunday School class at the First General Baptist Church in Truman. In the next few weeks, we will profile several people in the Bible who exhibited courage and faithfulness during trying times. This week, the lesson is about Ruth, and we're going to read scripture from, surprise, the book of Ruth, specifically chapter 1. Now, while traveling on the road of life, we make many decisions about which turns to make. Sometimes we can see where the path will lead us, so we feel confident in our decision. Other times, the view ahead is unclear, it's foggy, or it's totally blocked. That's when we gather the facts, do a lot of praying, and then take the best turn. Now, add to our journey massive potholes of despair or distress, maybe the death of a loved one or the loss of a career. And this decision-making scenario becomes the biggest traffic jam we've ever experienced. How do we make the right choices? How do we hear the voice of God so we can take the correct leap of faith? Now, in the scripture we're going to read, 3 women in the rock-bottom pit of despair are on a road, uncertain how it will end and what choices will be made. Finding the path that God desires will take great faith, but it will create ripple effects throughout the rest of time. Now, to kind of set up the scripture I'm going to read, there was a man named Elimelech. He had a wife, Naomi. They had 2 sons, and there in Judah, famine hit the area, and in order to support his family, the man decided to move his family to Moab, and after getting to Moab, he died. His sons married 2 ladies by the name of Orpah and Ruth, and later the sons died, leaving all 3 women, Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah, as widows. We'll read the scripture now from the first chapter of Ruth, beginning in verse 6. Then Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So Naomi and her daughters-in-law got ready to leave Moab to return to her homeland. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she set out from the place where she had been living, and they took the road that would lead them back to Judah. But on the way, Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. "No," the girls said, "we want to go with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Why should you go with me? Can I still give birth to other sons who could grow up to be your husbands? No, my daughters, return to your parents' homes, for I am too old to marry again. And even if it were possible, and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry someone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord himself has raised his fist against me." And again they wept together, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. "Look," Naomi said to her, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same." But Ruth replied, "Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by her daughter-in-law Ruth, the young Moabite woman. They arrived in Bethlehem in late spring at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, as we said before, we had 3 widow women, and widowhood was an especially precarious state for women in those days. In the ancient Near East, including both Moab and Israel, men had far more economic power than women. A woman left without male relatives to care for her could be reduced to abject poverty, and prostitution might result. Fathers or sons were the best lines of defense to protect widows. In the case of younger widows, this protection lasted until new husbands could be found. Now, as they returned, the two daughters-in-law accompanying Naomi as they went back to Israel, that the Moabite women began this journey with their mother-in-law speaks to the depth of their love for and devotion to her. Traveling with Naomi potentially put her well-being over the younger widow's own future prospects for marriage and family. It was about a 7 to 10 day journey from Moab to Bethlehem, rugged terrain. And at some point along the journey, Naomi had compassion for her daughters-in-law. They were young and could still marry again if she released them from the responsibility of tending to her needs. Their chances of finding a Moabite man to marry them would be high. Ruth and Orpah profusely cried, proclaiming they would stay with her. Naomi told them that she was too old to marry again, couldn't bear any more sons for them to marry, as the law of Moses said. According to that law, a husband's brother was bound to marry the widow. Well, there's no brothers left in this particular family. Ruth and Orpah were considered outcasts from Moab and would have trouble finding husbands in Bethlehem, so Naomi continued to try to get them to go back. Eventually, Orpah kind of gave in, as you would say. She kissed Naomi and she left to return to Moab. But Ruth hugged Naomi and held on, wouldn't let go. And from verse 16 and 17, Ruth said, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." Now, when Naomi heard this and understood that Ruth was determined to return with Naomi, she stopped urging her to go back to Moab, and they kept on with their journey. Now, Ruth resolved to follow Naomi all the days of her life. Ruth did not know all that lay ahead for her, yet surrendered her whole being from that day forward to being part of Naomi's life. This included changing her identity. She would leave her home, her people, her culture, her religious beliefs. They would be all left behind. Once Naomi realized Ruth's devotion and determination, Naomi quit asking Ruth to return home. Instead, they traveled this unknown adventure together, believing that Naomi's God would see them through together. Now, Ruth's faithfulness to Naomi resulted in a godly man named Boaz stepping into the kinsman redeemer role by marrying Ruth and caring for Elimelech's property and his wife and daughter-in-law. Ruth became the mother of Obed, who fathered Jesse, who fathered King David, and the lineage that brought forth the ultimate kinsman redeemer, Jesus Christ the Messiah. All because Ruth acted in faith, following an unknown path, but believing Naomi and her God would see them through.